The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get, get started in about 3 or 4 minutes. So just hang tight and thank you all so much. One moment. All right, welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar on cultural competency. Thank you all so much for coming today. So today we are going over the principles of community engagement, which is actually the third part in a 3-part cultural competency series. Some of you may have been with us yesterday for segment 1. Just so you know, the segments or webinars don't have to be taken in order. You can take one or take them all. They'll be going on throughout the spring I think we have our last one is in July for this fiscal year. All right. So today we're going to be covering the principles of community engagement, as I said, part of our cultural competency webinar series. So first I'd like to start off before we really get into things is by thanking you all for taking time out of your day to commit to being here to learn about cultural competency and engaging diverse communities. It's really awesome that you all are making this a priority, especially I know we're all super busy. So I ask that during this time we put away other distractions and really try to focus on this webinar, because I really want to make this webinar great for you guys, and I'd love to interact with you and hear from you. And so hopefully for the next hour and a half, we'll hopefully get done a little early. We can really have some good conversations surrounding cultural competency and larger topics at hand. So before we get started, I like to have a couple group commitments. Basically, these are just items on our agenda that I want us to all be mindful of as we're talking about difficult subjects. Be sure to listen attentively. That's one of the things that we're actually going to talk to you all about today. When you're engaging in different communities, diverse communities, listening attentively is really important. Having an open mind, understanding that there are going to be differences of opinion, and that's okay, and that's what we are all here to learn from. I hope that you all will feel comfortable speaking honestly, sharing the space. We don't really have to worry about so much today because there's it looks like there's not too many of you. We may have a couple others trickle in a little later, but please feel free at any time if you would like to ask a question or have a comment. I can also unmute you, and then you can speak to the rest of the individuals. Just be mindful that you are being recorded on here. It's just for if other people aren't able to attend, then we can put it on our YouTube channel and they can watch it. Confidentiality, taking the learning but leaving the names here, really important. And also reserving the right to change your mind. And hopefully we will all learn something new, and hopefully I will learn something new from you all throughout this webinar. So we'll go ahead and get started. So first thing I want to do, and for those of you that were with me yesterday, this is one of our interactive parts that really helps when you all are a part of this webinar, because I really want to make this webinar all about you all. So I want you to start off by getting us thinking. We're talking about community engagement. So I want to hear from you what words or phrases come to mind when you think of the word community. What kind of words, phrases come to mind if I just say community? What do you think of? So there are two different ways to respond, and I'll go over those, and please let me know if you're having any trouble. If you would like to do it via a URL on a web browser through your computer, you will go to, using the first line right up here, hopefully you can see my mouse, you will go to polev.com/NAMI Californ. Notice it's not California, it's Californ. I think they just cut it off there. And then 886. And then if you are using a cell phone and you have cell service, you can go ahead and in the phone number box where you would normally have your contact information, you're going to put this number right here, 22333. And in the body of the text message, you are going to write NAMI, Californ again, the same without the IA, and 886. After you type that in the body of the text message, you should get a response back saying that you have joined the poll, and from there you will be able to text answers. Please go ahead and think of what community means to you, what words come to mind, what phrases, and go ahead and type those in either using the URL polev.com/NAMICaliforn886 or text NAMICaliforn886 in the body of your message using the phone number 22333. So I'll just take a minute, and if you're having any trouble, you can virtually raise your hand or you can ask a question, and I will be more than happy to help troubleshoot with you. I'm going to give this just a little more time. I'm really hoping y'all can help me out here because it does make the webinar so much better when we do get responses from you, our audience members. I really want you all to be a part of the conversation today and don't want to just be speaking at you. So if you are able to, I would love for you to be a part of this and really interact with me, your presenter, Catherine. And go ahead and go to the URL, thepollev.com, NAMI, California, and type in your what thoughts come to mind when you think of community or when you think of community engagement. What phrases or words come to mind? Alternatively, you can send a text message in where the text message number goes, where the phone number goes. You're going to write 22333, and in the body of the text, write NAMI, California, 886. And from there, you'll be able to text in responses that will show up on this screen as a word cloud. So we're going to give it a few more seconds. I'd love it if you all could help me out. This would be great. So if you have any problems or anything, please send me a question, but I'll let you all try and navigate that right now for a minute. Okay, I hope y'all are able to get onto the poll everywhere because we're going to have a couple more polls throughout the webinar, and it really helps to have your input. I really can't do this alone. In order for it to be an effective webinar, you really need your guys' help. So if you're having any problems, please send me a question or raise your hand, and I would love to hear from you all through the polls and also through this webinar. So for the sake of time, oh, awesome, there we go. I thought no one was able to come in. There they come. Perfect. Okay, this is awesome. Right in the nick of time. I love it. So I see that some of you are able to get on there. So if anyone was not or is having trouble, please shoot me a message. So yay, thank you. I love this. I love hearing from you all. Okay, community. Let's see what we got. And feel free to type in as many responses as you would like. The more, the better. Groups, multiple, family, shareholders, interest, and special. Awesome. That's great. Okay, so we have some awesome words to start with. So I like to start with this just to get us in a mindset of thinking about community and community engagement, so that we're all coming into this with kind of a frame of mind and really are ready to talk about community engagement. So thank you all. And we will be having more polling throughout the session. So be sure to have that URL ready or have your phone ready to send a text message. So thank you guys so much. I love hearing from you. So our learning objectives for today. So what we want to go over is we want to obviously define community. We have already started to define community through all of your engagement. We want to define the key principles of community engagement. What are, best practices for community engagement? And what is the spectrum for community engagement? Because community engagement is a really fluid term, and it's very important to understand how and to what extent your affiliate or organization wants to outreach into communities. Then we also want to explore and discuss strategies and pitfalls of engaging communities. What's worked, what's not, and tips surrounding that. And then finally, identify useful resources and reference to help you guide this outreach in the future. So I've broken it up into 3 parts. We'll see how we're doing. We'll hopefully have breaks in between each part. But I don't expect it to run the full 2 hours. Unless you all are super engaged. In that case, that is wonderful. And so we're going to have 2 really brief break, so if you need to stretch your legs or anything. We're going to start out by reviewing some key terminology. In part 2, we're going to move on to describing community engagement efforts. What are the successes? What are some of the challenges? And then in part 3, highlight some of the discussions and highlight and further discuss some of these successes and challenges. So part 1, key terminology. We want to, in this first part, explore the value and the structure and the value of structure and mindfulness in your approach to engaging and working with different communities. So we want to know the what, the why, the how. So what do we mean by community? We have already started, some of you are saying, I think values, family, interests, special, and I think those are all great topics to get us going and thinking about community. From an academic and organizational standpoint, there are 4 main approaches that are used. And just to give you, this is helpful to give you an idea, but a lot of times we approach community in such a way that these 4 ways to define community overlap with one another. So first we have a system perspective. So a system perspective is really is a very common approach to viewing a community, and probably one we're most familiar with, that a community is comprised of a bunch of different systems that have different functions within inside of it, almost like a living creature has organisms that perform a certain function. Or within a town, we have the police department who they have a special job. We have hospitals who care for the medical needs of individuals, and basically this large body that inside has specialized groups that work towards a specific function. Social perspective is really focusing on the network between individuals. So we can call this a social or political networks, links between individuals, organizations, leaders, and understanding how these links can be critical to planning engagement efforts. Virtual perspective, this is all about the online world and how communities were often geographically mapped, but now we have today this whole online arena of computer-mediated communications where people can access information, meet people, and ultimately make decisions about their lives through this online platform. The individual perspective. I think this perspective is really interesting because it basically says that individuals have their own perspective of what community means to them, which I think is very important for this lesson. And that what's so important is to understand that, especially through the individual perspective, individuals may belong to more than one community. And I don't think any of us living in this world belong to, or could say we just belong to one community, because our personal identities are multifaceted. So maybe we identify with a certain racial group, and maybe a certain religious group, and maybe a certain gender or sexuality group. These are all different things that we may belong to on an individual level. So what do we mean by community engagement? And let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What exactly is community engagement? So it is a process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geographic proximity, not always, but a lot of times, special interest, or similar situations to address issues affecting the well-being of those people. So that is a very broad definition of community, and community is very broad. So a powerful vehicle for bringing about environmental and behavioral changes to improve health, especially of the community and its members. Community engagement often involves partnerships, coalitions, and ways that help to mobilize resources and influence systems, change relationships among partners, and serve as catalysts for changing policies, programs, and practices. Woo! Okay, that was a lot. Key points. a process of working collaboratively. This is really key because historically we've had a lot of there has been a lot of, especially within academic research, a lot of problematic practices of community engagement that is actually really more exploitation and utilizing the knowledge or resources of another group for one's own benefit without actually providing anything back to that community or involving them in the process. So true community engagement at its heart is working with and through to positively affect the well-being of those people. And it really is a powerful vehicle for bringing about changes, especially here at NAMBI. I want to emphasize that obviously a lot of affiliates are primarily volunteer run or have very few staff. And so community engagement is just so important in order to not only spread the message of NAMI, but to have other partner organizations that you can help spread the message with. So, and that leads me perfectly into the third one. It involves partnerships and coalitions. We don't need to recreate the wheel every time we want to engage with a different community or every time we have a new endeavor. There are oftentimes organizations that are already out there doing this wonderful work or working with communities that we want to. And so by capitalizing on that and really working with them, we can help to benefit ourselves, their organization, and the overall population we're seeking to serve. So some forms of community engagement could be organized groups, agencies, different institutions, or even just individuals. Collaborators may be engaged in health promotion research or policy making. So these are different kinds of community engagement within the public health setting. But it's really important that we note that community engagement can also be seen as a continuum of involvement. So we're going to talk about that more in a moment. But what's really important about this is, like I said before, there are different levels of engaging in a community, and it's very important to be that all members of a coalition or agency or whatever form of community engagement you're employing are on the same page about to what level we want this other community entity to be involved with our project. Community engagement can be seen as a continuum of community involvement, which leads us to the actual continuum of community engagement. So if you take a look here at the left, we start out with the least amount of engagement, and as we progress to the right, we're going to have the most amount of engagement. So increasing level of community involvement, impact. Note, the more you are involved with that community or that organization, the more impact you're also going to have. And the more trust you're going to hopefully gain, and the more communication you're going to have between yourself and that community. So we start over on the left with outreach. This is some basic community involvement. The entities coexist, and it's a bit more hierarchical. So perhaps one organization telling another organization about their resources, but not really involving them within any sort of process. Moving over to consult, the entities are sharing information, they're developing connections, there's more community involvement, and this time the entity seeking to involve other organizations or communities is having the communication flow go two ways. So they're actually hearing back from that community and saying, okay, this is what I'm hearing from you, is this accurate? Involvement is even better community engagement. The communication is really flowing both ways, and participation, again, is flowing both ways. And the entities are cooperating with one another. It doesn't mean they're working side by side yet, but they're doing more than just sharing information. Collaborating is really emphasized with the communication flow is bidirectional. So it is not I am talking to you, you listen, and that is the end of our conversation. It is a bidirectional flow of communication. And it forms partnerships with community on each aspect of the project, from development to solution. We're going to talk a little bit more about this as well. How to instill community engagement and principles of community engagement at every level of your organization, in order to really have this overarching goal of engaging with communities in a culturally competent manner. And then finally, we have shared leadership, which is the final decision making is at the community level. So for example, if I here working at NAMI want to reach out to the local religious Latino community, and I speak with them, and I say I go to one church and I speak with someone, they ultimately are going to have the say regarding even though I have come in with a certain project, they are going to say whether the project is even relevant. Well, hopefully they said that long before, but ultimately they're going to have decision-making power because you're really seeking to change the community from within rather than putting your outside notions on them. So they are going to have a lot of control, which makes it really great because you're getting the community's decision ultimately for what's best for them, but at the same time that can make it very difficult for outside bodies trying to do work and having to relinquish some power. So like I said, it really depends on what type of outreach you're doing. That will really, show at what level do you want to engage the community. So the key really is that it is a process and it is focused on forming relationships with community and members. It evolves. It is an ongoing process, just like we talked about. I know some of you were here yesterday for yesterday's cultural competency, that it's really focused on forming relationships and having a dynamic process. It is not an end-all, be-all. We will not get to some certain point where we can say, okay, we've engaged the community and we're done. It really is an ongoing process of constantly forming relationships, and that is really going to evolve over time so you can work with this community. And it's really based in, or when done correctly, it is based in trust, respect, and ultimately mutual goals. So why are we even talking about community engagement? Why is it important, and why should we use it? So one of the major things is, in order to make a true lasting change in the community, it is essential that you involve that community and the key stakeholders in your project or intervention at every step that is possible. This involves forming relationships with informal stakeholders and formal stakeholders. So when I say informal stakeholders, those are going to be less formal leaders, but they are kind of gatekeepers to the more formal leaders within a community, whereas those key stakeholders are going to be the main individuals. Let me try and give you an example. So if I am trying to reach out to the LGBTQ community, maybe I'll reach out and I'll speak with an organization's coordinators and those things. Those are kind of my informal stakeholders that I'm going to have, and community informants, and then they're going to lead me to their CEOs, their policymakers, the people who are really in charge of everything, which are their formal stakeholders, that is ultimately going to really give me and them the power for us to work together. So in order for a community to adopt change, it has to be relevant to the community goals and values. So oftentimes we can go in with our own agenda, and in reality, that is not a pressing matter or something that it is needed by the community. So it's very important to make sure that what we're even trying to do is relevant for the community. And so for changes to be lasting, it must involve community members carrying forward these changes. So in order for it to be sustainable, we need to have actual community members carry these messages forward within their community. So in this sense, community engagement is similar in a way to effective public speaking, which is also something we covered a little bit in webinar 1. You need to understand your own skills or your organization's skills. You have to have skills related to engagement, knowledge of the subject and knowledge of the community you seek to engage, organize your topics in a meaningful way, have a clear and direct message so you can really go to that community or organization and let them know what kind of a partnership or involvement you are seeking. Knowing your target audience and knowing your community. This is going to help you to tailor your projects to their needs, and obviously you can go in and ask them more about their needs, but it's very important to go in with at least some sort of a working knowledge of that community, if that community has been approached in the past by other entities similar to NAMI or similar to your organization, and how that relationship has been in the past. This involves knowing some of the needs and concerns of the community, as well as ensuring your subject matter is appropriate and relevant to your audience or community. So ultimately, you will be able to engage them in an active manner. So this is where we get why we really need community engagement, because not only is it good from a positive ethical standpoint, but community engagement really helps your business or organization or nonprofit or whatever the entity may be flourish. So it is going to help with your agenda and agenda setting, with project design and delivery. You're going to have access to way more resources and way more input. It's going to create greater ability to implement what you actually want to do, and a greater ability to actually create lasting and sustainable change. Like I said, it's going to improve your ethics. So you're going to actually be working with a community rather than, telling a community what they need, which can be very problematic. And it involves the public in your project. You're getting more people involved, and ultimately you're going to make more connections. And we all know that through networking, that's where a lot of these great connections are built that ultimately help smaller organizations thrive because they're able to partner with one another. It also helps to create academic partnerships, so partnerships with universities and institutions throughout wherever you are located, and you can even get individual research participants involved, and like I was saying before, other community organizations and the general public. So the focus really is on the process and forming relationships and knowing that this interaction with whatever community you're seeking to engage is going to evolve over time. It really is an ongoing and a dynamic process, and it needs to be based on trust, respect, and mutual goals, because without that, no one is going to accomplish anything. And so to motivate true change, the project and its values are adopted by the community and its members. I think something that's really important for us to note as either employees at an organization seeking to engage communities, or as individuals here at NAMI, that a lot of times if we are seeking to engage a community that we're not already engaged in, it means that we are most likely not a part of that community. And that's okay. But the really important point is to acknowledge that and understand that we may not be accepted right away. They may be skeptical based on past relations they've had with other organizations, even if it's not NAMI. They may have had negative experiences in the past. And so it's really important to acknowledge that you are an outsider, and that building these relationships is likely going to take much more than an email or a phone call just to set up something brief, because it really isn't an excuse to send out an email and then just say, oh, well, we never heard back from them. Well, there may be other reasons why you're not hearing back from them, which includes mistrust of your organization because you may be seen as an outsider. And that's so important to understand so that we can try and work with that, and if need be, acknowledge harm that has been done in the past by other organizations, and move forward and still try to connect with the community, but it may take a while. So how are we actually going to implement these concepts? So for successful collaboration within a community, we have to strive to understand the point of view of insiders, so members of the community, because most likely we're going to be considered outsiders, because if we are insiders, then hopefully we've already have that community involved, and if not, then you have already a key stake being an insider within that community, and you can really use that and harness that to work with the community at hand. And you're going to best understand others' point of view, or in order to do so, we have to first recognize our own culture and how it shapes our beliefs. Okay, I'm hoping, also if at any time, just side note, if anyone can't hear me, please let me know, because throughout this it's been saying that my audio is going in and out, so hopefully you all can hear me. I'll pause when it goes out, but let me know if not. So back to the point, we are on point number 2, and so this is talking about how we need to understand our own culture and how it shapes our beliefs and our understanding of health, mental health, and illness, or whatever your organization is trying to achieve. Our lived experience is going to impact how we interact with other communities, and this is very important to acknowledge so that we can understand our role, how we may be perceived by the community, and how best to move forward with engaging them. So engaging a community really starts with engaging its members, similar to engaging an audience from webinar 1, and I know some of you were here yesterday for that. So we really have to think about, at what level do we want to affect this change? So before we, oops, sorry, I'm skipping around here. There we go. So just to review, we're thinking about what level we want to engage the community at. And it goes all the way from outreach to shared leaders. And I want you to take a look at this. I'm going to pause the screen for a moment and pull up a video. And throughout this video, I want you to think about, at what level is this project trying to engage communities? Where are they moving towards? And what are they doing? What level would we perhaps classify them at?
Mental health resources weren't as readily accessible. I never ever thought to go to an authority figure to talk about my mental health issues, because no one ever did that. It was so stigmatized.
We have the Filipino community, the Asian community, largely Filipino. Of course, now the LGBT community is an emerging community in Solano County and in the Bay Area. So we have a very low penetration rate in terms of usage of mental health services.
I think that the challenges that Solano County has are challenges that are in any county.
Now we have to be more in the community and be on the ground working, helping the people to survive in a very difficult environment.
Around high school, I suppressed a lot of my mental health challenges. I didn't really know what depression meant or know what PTSD meant. I just know that that's just issues you don't really talk about, especially growing in a very conservative Vietnamese community.
Based on our data, we have 8,000 medical eligible clients. Not all of them have mental health issues, obviously, but we have 200 some clients in Solano County that have that use mental health services right now, in the last 2-3 years. That's the data we have. So it's really very low.
In California, we have the Mental Health Services Act, which allows for communities to take stock and invest in innovative transformation of their system. And so Solano County had seen some of the work that we've done with other organizations and reached out to collaborate with us.
This is the dream of researchers like us, that the need comes from the community itself, because they have heard about the things that we have been working on with our center. decided to call it the cultural transformation model, because what they are hoping to do is truly to transform the way in which services, specifically mental health services, are provided for these three target populations. The beauty about it is that so many stakeholders provided input, valuable input, that now it is a model of Solano County.
So to address the disparities and to improve community mental health, we need more than just a set of standards. The standards can help guide the strategies and solution, but we need an engine to power these efforts. And that engine is people.
Clients can teach us as much as we can teach them, and that we can learn from each other.
Counselors, therapists, psychologists that look like me, even female bodied, Asian or queer, I would feel more comfortable approaching my issues.
If you advertise a service that you can provide to the community, that doesn't guarantee, in fact, it doesn't say anything about whether or not those services are actually relevant. Part of the missing factor is trust, building trust. And what that requires is relationship. So it's about engaging with the community members, with the community-based organizations, and the county services to develop a sense of community and trust within everybody involved.
We have an outreach coordinator who's a clinician who speaks Filipino, very familiar with the culture, native speaker.
One critical piece about all of this is that the outcomes, the specific metrics that we are going to be using are not going to come from folks like me, who are academicians, and we love to look at metrics and how to measure things. But also we are going to be consulting with the communities themselves and the county and the community-based organizations as to what matters to them.
The county, I think, is moving in the right direction in terms of doing outreach and engagement and partnering with a research institution like UC Davis. We've never done that before. So this is truly an innovative project.
Alrighty, so go ahead and take a moment and think about at what level this cultural transformation model, as they call it, is trying to affect change. And I would love to hear, let me just get to this. There we go. So at what level do you all think that this project is trying to impact change and create community engagement? There's no right or wrong answers. I'd love your thoughts so we can start looking at different levels of community involvement. So they're talking about trying to engage with diverse communities, especially LGBTQ, Filipino, and Latino communities. And they do have a partnership with UC Davis. And again, this is Solano County. So if you all have any ideas, go ahead and type them in this question box, and I'll wait to hear from you. Even if you all just want to throw out a guess or something like that, that's totally fine too. I know you all are super, super busy people, and I want to thank you so much for coming to this webinar. Just as much as we can be present and interactive, I would really love that, because I don't want to just be talking to myself for, this whole time. So I really want to hear from you all. So as much as we can be present and engaged, that would be wonderful. Okay, so I'm not getting any responses. Hopefully I will hear from you soon. But This project really is, although it is a very innovative project at Solano County, it really is kind of at the outreach consult level, because they are just starting their outreach, and they have some community involvement. They said they've spoken with the community and they are sharing information, but they're really just starting, and so for those reasons, and because they don't have specific community leaders that are really sharing any sort of power or collaborating with Solano County, then they're really going to start at the outreach and consult for right then. But then it looks like they're really trying to progress to form that collaborative or shared leadership, even potentially relationship with these Filipino, Latino, and LGBTQ populations. So where are we all at? It is sometimes difficult to gauge where your audience or community group is, the community that you want to engage. And it's really important to understand where your community is at, because we have to meet people where they're at, and we can't go in and provide services that are completely irrelevant for them, or maybe that they even already have. So it can be hard to discern sometimes in conversations, but at the same time, if you are able to have an open and honest conversation with key community members and leaders, those can be really helpful to understand what the community needs and how your organization could best serve them. Using polls like the one that I am using in this is also really helpful. So it can be helpful to poll throughout, especially if you're doing things like webinars, or if you want anonymity as part of the, I guess, so people are really giving their honest answers. If you want that anonymity, then polls can also be helpful too. So we are going to try this now. So we are going to do a couple more polls. So I'd love if you're ready to get out, either pull up another browser or your phone, and I want to hear from you all. So the first question is, I feel comfortable recognizing which level of engagement a project is working at. And you will either go to pollev.com/NAMICalifornia886 on your URL, or you can text in the phone number. You're going to write 22333. And in the text box, you're going to write NAMI California 886 and text A, B, or C. A, yes. B, maybe. C, not quite yet, to that number, or type it in, and let's see where you all are. So this again is relating to the outreach, collaboration, shared leadership. Do you feel like you all understand those levels of community engagement, or is that something we're still working on? Okay, awesome. So thank you. Yes, you can type in your answer. I received one individual's answer via type. Awesome. I love that. So we have one individual who replied that it is something they are still working on. So I would say maybe, not quite yet, in that range. Awesome. Thank you for your response. Anyone else? I would love to hear from you. And once again, if anyone is having any sort of trouble accessing this, please let me know. Okay, so the question again is, I feel comfortable recognizing which level of engagement my project is working on, or a project is working at. And this is, again, the different kind of levels that we talked about. They are defined differently in different, given different sources. But I'd love to hear if you all feel comfortable with these, if these are things you've known before, and if not, let me know. We are going to move on to the next poll question, so I'd love to hear from you again. Okay, so the next question is, I have experience in community engagement. So you're either going to type in the URL, pollev.com/NAMICalifornia886, or you're going to put in the text message box where you type your message, NAMICalifornia886, and in the phone number box, you're going to write 22333, and then A for strongly agree, B for agree, C for neutral, D for disagree, and E for strongly disagree. So I have experience in community engagement. Awesome. So we got one answer. So one individual said that they strongly agree that they have experience in community engagement, and that is awesome. Again, if you are having any trouble, please let me know, and I can help troubleshoot with you on how to access this. I'm going to wait another moment and then go on to the next question. Okay, so the next one is, I know how to comfortably navigate conflict in groups/community engagement topics. So do you feel comfortable navigating conflict, especially within groups or in projects where community engagement is involved? I want to know. So text, or you can use the URL pollev.com/NAMICalifornia886, or you can type in the number box 22333, and then in the text message box, NAMICalifornia886. A for strongly agree, B for agree, C for not sure, and D for disagree, and E for strongly disagree. So awesome. So we have one agree. That is awesome. Thank you so much for your response. Okay, and we have a strongly agree. Awesome. Yeah, so it seems like the answers that we've gotten so far is that we're all feeling pretty comfortable with navigating conflict within groups or community engagement processes. It's also really important to note that we all, as comfortable as we may feel, it's always important to leave room for learning. And while we still can feel confident about something, we also have to leave room for that learning, especially with engaging new and different community organizations or different communities. Okay, so our next poll is going to be, I have a project I am doing involving community engagement. I want to hear from you guys. Are you guys working on a project right now that involves engaging a community or communities or going out into the community? I want to know. A for yes, I am doing a community engagement project, and B for no, not currently, but maybe you will in the future. So we have one yes, and I would venture to say that most of you, especially if you're working here at NAMI, are doing some sort of a project that involves the community, whether it's engaging a new community or a community you already have a relationship with. So thank you all for your answers. And our next one, our final one is, I am interested in learning how I can get involved in projects involving community engagement. So this means I am looking to engage in other communities, and I want to know how to do that. And I want to learn how to involve others in this process. A for yes, B for maybe, and C, no thanks, maybe another time. And remember that you can use either the URL or the text message, and if you're having any trouble, please shoot me a message and I will help you out as best I can. Okay, so looks like no one was able to jump in on this one. Oh, yay, awesome. So yes, I am interested in learning. Great, love it. If you're not, that's okay too. But I love that we are interested in learning how we can involve and better involve the community in our project. So thank you. We are now going to have a brief break given time. So go ahead and stretch your legs. We are going to resume. Let's see what time it is. Okay, it is 2:57. We're going to resume just a couple minutes after 3. So 3:02, give you 5 minutes to stretch your legs. But I really don't want us to take too long. So we'll aim to get back here around 3:02, and I will see you all momentarily. Okay, welcome back everyone. I hope you all had a moment to refresh yourself and get ready for the next part of this webinar. So we are going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start with part 2. We're going to describe some community engagement efforts that have gone here at NAMI and some of the successes and challenges that they found in those efforts. So our first example is, it says NAMI, not Northern California, but I'm pretty sure it means NAMI California partnering with NAMI Sacramento, because to my knowledge, there is no specific NAMI Northern California. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But this took place in Sacramento County in California, and basically the goal of the project was to better connect with the African American and Latino community. And these are very, very large, very diverse communities. And these had been 2 communities that had been challenges for NAMI to connect with, especially at a local level. And why did they want to do this? NAMI wanted to do this because they wanted to ensure that all individuals living in the Sacramento area, and especially those who are members of underserved communities related to healthcare, were being served by NAMI. So how did they do it? During a 2016 cultural mental health fair that was put on in partnership with NAMI California and NAMI Sacramento, they basically put on this health fair and then also brought had a mental health 101 presentation, and they went into the community. So the one thing that this example doesn't actually touch on is how they were able to garner that first relationship with a community. So maybe it was through some sort of an organization already serving those populations, or a religious institution or body, or something along those lines that they were able to form some sort of a connection with in order to put on this cultural mental health fair. And so after that presentation, some of the community members actually expressed interest. These are individuals who self-identified as part of the Latino or African American community, and they expressed an interest in NAMI and expressed that there was actually a lot of stigma surrounding mental illness and discrimination, and that this was really something that they wanted to help work on. So this was an opportunity for NAMI California and NAMI Sacramento to improve their relationships with these diverse communities. Fast forward 2 months later, NAMI Sacramento and NAMI California conducted a Mental Health 101 training, and the same community members that had gone to that cultural health fair from the African American and Latino community that had expressed interest were present. And those individuals were the same ones as, I'm repeating myself, as at the mental health fair, yes. So ultimately this was a success. I say success hesitantly because I feel that success implies some sort of an end goal that has been accomplished or attained. And really in community engagement, to create a sustainable partnership with yourself in a community or your organization in a community, it is really an ongoing relationship and a process. But so then after that, NAMI was able to have individuals from the Latino and African American community become mental health 101 trainers, which then they will, because they are a part of those communities and they are insiders, the community will likely be more receptive to their message because of their similar background. The second example, so this was a collaboration between NAMI California and CalMesa, or the California Mental Health Services Authority, Stigma and Discrimination Reduction Program Initiative. Long name, okay. But the focus of the project was to enhance prevention and early intervention, to enhance the public mental health system's ability to reach racially, ethnically, linguistically, and culturally diverse populations in California. And the project was really a collaboration between multiple organizations that had meetings, symposiums, needs assessments, and community collaboration. Ultimately, their end product was creating a video series and a nationwide campaign And they also produced the In Our Own Voice videos, which some of you, most likely, all of you have seen if you're a part of NAMI, and also the cultural adaptations, or basically adaptations targeted towards specific communities for In Our Own Voice. So these, I just like to show these photos because these are examples of community members that these actually were all part of the Mental Health 101 program, and this is the video series of it. And so basically I like to show this to just remind us that we are working with so many different populations, to always be aware that even if we say we are working with a specific community, all communities are so diverse. If we think about how diverse we all are on even just an individual level, we can start to understand that, you know, within communities there are different languages, there are different values, belief systems, norms, customs, and yes, some of them may overlap throughout the community, but mostly we really need to be aware that communities are not homogeneous entities and that they have individuals who all have different beliefs, and we can't put the burden or onus on one individual from that community to speak for their entire diverse community, because that simply isn't representing their community wholly. These are some more individuals from the Mental Health 101. And so when we are taking a look at our community engagement and our engagement efforts, we really want to take a look at different community examples like we were talking about before. So what works, what has worked, and what hasn't worked, and how can we apply it to other community projects? But like I was saying, it's really important to be open to what we may not know about a community and be willing and open to learn. So some of these things I went over yesterday also in webinar 1, and this was, if I can get to it, hopefully. There we go. So for those of you I talked to yesterday, we were talking about basically going beyond what our snap judgment or snap thoughts or unconscious bias. If you're interested in that, come to webinar 2. But basically how we need to always keep our minds open to the possibility of something we don't know, or being aware of other things. So yesterday we talked about this, how possibly this person identifies as a woman and she is elderly, and how possibly this other individual identifies as a woman as well, though we're not fully positive because we can't ask them. And how maybe their relationship is great and everything is going well and they are related to each other. The daughter obviously has or granddaughter obviously has a fondness for her grandmother, and again, we're simply speculating. We could also speculate that maybe the grandmother has some things she hasn't told her granddaughter about. Maybe her roommate is actually her partner and she's afraid to come out. Or maybe it's vice versa. Or there are just so many other scenarios that we need to take into consideration when thinking about engaging diverse communities in order to understand that our preconceived notions about certain individuals are so limited, and we need to open ourselves up and be aware that more than one idea or one perception exists of an individual. This is just a picture of a mother and a daughter. So basically, these are just individuals who you may be trying to target or trying to engage in your community, and they are so diverse. I'm going to quickly skip over these for the sake of time because we have other things that are a bit more important, but it really is important to know that your audience is going to be very diverse. And I love this photo. I think the little girl, if she defines herself as a little girl, is very cute. So these are some of the NAMI walks too. We can take a look at all the diversity within them. And if you guys have any thoughts or questions, it is not limited to this short time right here. I would really love to hear from you so we can engage with each other, and maybe I can respond to some sort of questions or comments. Or remember, anytime I can unmute you, and you can also speak, so we can do that as well. But I am not going to limit it this time. I'm going to keep going with the presentation, and then if questions or comments pop up, shoot me either virtually raise your hand or shoot me a question, and we can have a little discussion. So I'm hoping, since I went through that part pretty quickly, I really want to focus on this last part. We are not going to take a break, but if you need to take a moment, obviously stretch your legs, do what you need, and come back. We are going to go right into part 3 so that we have enough time, because we've talked a lot about the theoretical side of community engagement, but it's really much more sticky and much more messy when we actually get into the nuts and bolts of community engagement on a real level, and not a theoretical level. So we want to explore, something we really want to explore as a part of community engagement, is possible breaks in communication for why projects that we hoped would have succeeded, that have partnered with different communities, may not have flourished or even taken off at all. So possible breaks in communication could be a misunderstanding. It could be cultural or linguistic, or it could just be a simple misunderstanding that happened. There can also be, which I touched on previously, a lack of trust. And I really cannot stress this enough. I think that sometimes when we are trying to engage with different communities, and they may not trust us as individuals or as an organization because we may not be considered insiders within their community. Instead of seeing this as a deterrent, see this as a space for learning. And if they have had organizations or government entities or what have you, whatever it might be, come in thinking, they know what's best for the community, and ultimately they just end up exploiting the community and kind of leaving them high and dry. Well, that's a space where you can talk about, like, hey, I want to hear about some of these experiences because we want to learn from that, so we're not doing that. We want to actually build a sustainable partnership with you. And understanding that this lack of trust does not mean that you should not try to engage that community, but it more just really means that you need to be aware of it and acknowledge that it may be present. Lack of mutual goals. So something organizations are really going to also need to think about is, to what extent do my goals align with the extent of the goals of the community I am trying to reach? So there may be some times when you really want to reach a certain community, but those issues that you want to tackle are simply not on the community's radar, and it's not something they are really interested in or something that they really want to do. Ultimately, that would not be a successful partnership or community engagement relationship, because that would be the organization instilling its values and notions on a community which does not want that engagement or help. So it's really important to be clear about what your mutual goals are. And then community members' attitude regarding a project. So this goes with the goals. So how important do community members perceive this project to be? Is it kind of superfluous, or is it something they've really needed for a really long time? At what level are they engaged with what your organization is trying to help them do? And so ultimately, remember that for community engagement to be effective, the ultimate goal is to empower. I can't say that enough. The community to integrate lasting changes. We want to be able to go in as an organization and then leave one day, but not leave that community with nothing. We want to leave them empowered, and we want to leave them so that they have sustainable ways to continue to create lasting changes within their own community. We want to leave and know that we are leaving that community, but actually the community members have joined some of our organizations, so it's sustainable. But what we really want to avoid is going in, doing our outreach, and then leaving the community high and dry. The relationship with the community really matters, and it will be what sets you up for ultimately successes and sustainable successes or failure, which failure can be a part of success, so do not let that deter you. So how can we navigate these challenges when we're engaging communities? Well, just like we talked about in webinar 1, we want to create a safe and trusting environment. We talked about this in pertaining to our presentation and our presentation skills, but we want to create a safe and trusting environment wherever we are trying to engage that community. We need to listen and be open and be curious. It is okay to not agree with what another individual is saying, but instead of shutting down, take a breath, take a step back. Maybe ask yourself if something in your lived experience is causing you to have this reaction, and then try to be curious and open. You don't need to agree with them, but you do need to be respectful and open to different ideas. So what is being said, and just as importantly, what is not being said? Acknowledge differences. This one is very important. We talked about this again with webinar 1, so I apologize for the repeats, but hopefully this will further drill the message home. During webinar 1, we talked about the colorblind approach, the idea that often has good intentions but is very problematic in the end, that when individuals say, oh, I don't see color, or I don't see race, for example, they're actually diminishing the effects of the fact that there really is racism that is very prominent within our society, and though we would like it not to be, it's still there, and we need to acknowledge it in order to really engage with different communities and understand where others are coming from. We can't ignore these things, so acknowledge differences and try to understand if both groups or individuals share mutual goals. So if not, maybe how could the goals be realigned to meet the needs of all involved? Or is this actually an effort that, does the community actually have similar goals? And if not, maybe we want to take a step back and say, maybe we want to outreach to a different community, because it looks like right now their priorities are so different from ours. At the same time, maybe you can tweak and try and change to meet the needs of the community, and they can, if they're willing, try and tweak some of their things to meet your needs as well. So it's really about this relationship. And that leads me perfectly into the last one, which is stay with the process. Focus on that relationship and not just the solution. Definitely fostering that relationship through cultural brokers and different individuals within the community, and constantly staying with the process and knowing that it may be difficult at times, but that this is very, very important to focus on rather than being stuck just focusing on the solution. So key factors to effectively engage communities. So if you weren't listening for any of the webinar, now is the time to listen. This is the important part, the meat of it. So 1, identify. Identify the community you want to support, the goals, the benefits to the community. Identify all those things that I would suggest identifying them with the community. Go in with preliminary goals and ideas, but be willing and able and ready to change things as needed, because we don't know the community unless we are a part of it or unless we are in it. And like I said before, even at that, communities are so diverse. We need to be ready to be flexible. Learn about the community's needs, learn about their values, learn about the disparities within groups. A lot of times we think of concepts like racism being simply a black versus white issue. There is a notion of colorism which exists in many communities of color, which is status based on having a lighter skin or a darker skin, even though you are a person of color. So we have to understand that there are disparities that exist even within communities. And ultimately, if we're going in and ignoring a community's values or ignoring their needs, the community is going to be very much less receptive to us because they'll know that we haven't taken the time to actually get to know them. And obviously some of this is simple internet research, and some of it is speaking with individuals who are already serving this community. That is so important. One moment, I just have a question here. Oh, never mind. Okay. Okay, outreach. It is so important to engage the community and identify stakeholders. So I'll just brush on this topic because I already talked about the different stakeholders and the different informal and formal stakeholders that you can engage with. So understand, it is so important to try and understand the views and approaches. So there are different ways of even, viewing the world, viewing knowledge, viewing all these different things, and it's so important to try and understand those. And then form shared values and goals surrounding those. So you want to, again, be flexible, like I said before, and understand that it is a process. It is an ongoing relationship that is not going to change overnight, and it is an ongoing process. And it is important to be really flexible and open to a dynamic relationship, because we cannot simply, go in with our goals and then just leave it at that. We need to make sure that we're tailoring our goals to the needs of that community. So how do we create safety and navigate challenging topics? The goal really is to create that safe and trusting environment so that people feel that they can be open and honest. And it's okay to listen and be curious and listen to what is being said and what is not being said, and acknowledge differences, which I already touched on. I'm going to skip down to the bottom and go over staying with the process. I cannot say this enough. Focus on that relationship and not just the solution. So the great quote that kind of ties it all together, which says, "You have your way, I have my way, and as for the right, the correct, and the only way, it does not exist." So always kind of keeping that in the back of your mind so that you understand that going into this, your perspective is really going to influence how you engage with communities. And so that is what is so important to keep in mind. This is great. I love this graphic. It's great to represent perspective. So different opinions can oftentimes be about perspective. So what I want you to look at right now is look at this image and see A and B. And right now, just looking at it quickly, are A and B, are those squares the same color or are they different? Take a moment, take a peek, and let me know what you think. So here is that. Same image, but with a color bar. So the color bar really helps us to show that so much things are about perspective. Here is that actual image. We're putting the color bars right there because it shows that A and B are actually the same color, and the green cylinder is distorting our view. So it's all about perspective, and that's so important to keep in mind when we are engaging in different communities. So again, just some more navigating this kind of conflict that can come up during when we're trying to engage communities. Really focusing on being sincere and real and acknowledging courage and honesty in the experience. Community engagement is a very, very difficult process. It is important to reflect back what the community is saying to ensure that you're understanding them. So here it says use audience's words. I would say use the community's words. And make room for disagreements. Like I said, we need to be flexible if we're going to engage communities and view these as opportunities. Acknowledge the differences and make room for disagreements. Again, last point, I'm just going to focus in on that, is it is possible to listen be open and respectful without sharing the same view as someone else. This is really, really important to keep in mind throughout all of our community engagement efforts, because even though we're trying to engage a community, it doesn't mean we're always going to have the same viewpoints. And that is okay, and there is learning, and there is great things that can come from diversity in views. So once again, this is just the different levels of community outreach. I hope that you all are having a bit better of an idea of going from outreach to shared leadership. And please note that shared leadership is not always the goal. Sometimes the goal is just outreach. Sometimes it's just we want to provide this information. Though note that as you progress through these stages, you are going to have more meaningful and more impactful involvement with that community. So outreach is fine. It's probably not going to do a lot though. Collaboration, shared leadership, that is going to do a lot more for the community, but it's also going to involve a lot more work and a lot more trust. So those are things you need to take into consideration. So the key points to take home from this lecture series are that healthcare disparities and biases still exist. We can give this example that I actually gave yesterday as well, of this little girl who is a daughter of a friend of mine, and she went to school one day and they had a parrot, and the parrot was she was really excited about the parrot and wanted to pet the parrot, and she came home from school and told her mom, I really want to pet the parrot, like why, but they wouldn't let me. And the mom's thinking, well, okay, this is a live parrot, of course they wouldn't. And the daughter goes, no, mom, this was just a stuffed parrot, and it was so pretty, and I really wanted to pet it. And then she said, but I couldn't. And her mom said, okay, well, why not? And then the daughter said that the young girl whose pet stuffed parrot it was, said that the other girl's hands were too dirty. And her mom said, well, were your hands dirty? And the little girl replied that no, she had just washed her hands. And then she realized that actually this little girl who was the owner of this stuffed parrot was saying that this other little girl's hands were dirty because this other little girl had darker skin. And her mom was honestly just heartbroken, because this was one of the first times she was starting to understand that her daughter was learning about race and racism, and understanding that this other little girl most likely was too young to even have any sort of negative intentions behind it. But because of her lived experience in the world, she has been taught that somehow dark skin is being equated with being dirty. And that all is to say that a lot of times we think that these disparities, these biases, these prejudices are over and done with, or they've gotten a lot better, so we don't have to worry about it. And we really need to remember that these things are still going on to this day. And especially when you're trying to create trust with whatever community you're hoping to engage, this is so important to take note of and to not take lightly, because these experiences did not happen just in the past. They are happening every single day today, unfortunately, but that needs to be acknowledged. So we have to remember the value in taking time to sit down and really engage and build that relationship with our team and our collaborators, so that we can have a really good collaboration between these different groups that we are trying to engage. Key take-home points. So to be an effective in communicating or collaborating with others and other communities, we have to remember that we are all different, and we're coming from different backgrounds, and we have different experiences, and all of those differences are going to impact how we interact with one another. And so that's why it's so important to focus on the relationship. Community engagement is a process that won't happen overnight. If you find the key to community engagement and find a way that it can happen in a day, I would love to hear it, because no one has found it thus far. It is hard. I will not beat around the bush. And so it's really so important to focus on that relationship, focus on that process, building trust with the community, and understanding that this relationship is going to be dynamic and it's going to evolve over time. And we need to be flexible enough to move as it evolves and changes. We also need to be willing and open to nurture the relationship. So this can lead to stronger outcomes. So like I said, this is all part of how community engagement really is a process. And you really need to nurture and work on that relationship in order to engage communities. In order to build this strong team, alliance, or even just an effective presentation, it requires learning each individual's strengths and needs. We all have strengths. Let's find ways to capitalize on them. We all have needs. What are those needs? And how can we make our needs align so that we can work together to solve these problems? Again, just recapping, we really want to know and start to understand the individual or the community that we want to reach. We want to know these different communities, know what they value, what they find important, what their issues and their needs are in order to engage them. And finally, I would like to acknowledge the NIH principles of community engagement. Those are, if you haven't checked them out already, they are 9 principles of community engagement, and they are really, really great. They are a bit theoretical, but it's good when examples are provided with them, because you can really see how these principles can be put into action. And this is really what this webinar has been formulated around. And then we also really want to thank Henry Ton, who helped put together this this whole webinar as well. So at this time, I want to thank you all so much for participating. This was so wonderful to have you all. Right now, if you all have any questions or comments, please feel free. If you would like to say anything, I'm going to just keep it on this contact screen, so that if you would like to get involved or have any further questions. So for just general inquiries, you can email NAMI California at namica.org or call 916. Oh, I just realized that is a dated phone number. Okay, I'm going to have to go in and change that. So don't call that number. That is not the NAMI California current number. But the emails are correct. Catherine@namica.org. That is my email address. I would love to hear from you. And if you have any feedback or questions or comments or want to know more, please feel free to reach out to me. Please note that we are doing other cultural competency and cultural and linguistic responsiveness webinars. If you're a part of the NAMI email list or are on one of our listserv lists, you will most likely be getting emails about it already. But if you're not, please let me know. I will send a follow-up email to all the participants with other webinars listed and the times and the dates, so that hopefully you all can join us for those. So at this time, I'm going to stay online for a few more minutes, and if any of you have any comments or questions, I can take you off mute and we can chat, or you can just type a question, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I will be online for the next couple of minutes, and thank you all so much for participating in this webinar. I really can't thank you enough. Hi, so for those of you, if you're just joining us, I just see someone came on. We are actually at the end of this webinar. Have wrapped up, but we will be able to have this. I will be uploading a video of this whole presentation to YouTube, and I will be sending out an email to all registrants, which will include a link to the webinar on YouTube, and then also to future webinars that we have coming up. We are doing this webinar, I believe, twice more before June. So you do have an opportunity to do it in person. If you want to watch the video, awesome, but we try and make it interactive. So if you can make it to another one, I will be sending out those dates. This is Cultural Competency Webinar 3, and again, it is going on twice more before June. So we would love to have you take part and sign up for that. And please feel free to message me with any questions you may have.